all you boredom busters, and welcome to all you new hobby hunters. I am your host, Brad Claybaugh, and this is Brad's Boredom Busters. This is the channel that explores all kinds of arts and crafts, so if you're looking for something new to do, this is the channel for you. So I told you in our last video we were making a banner for a spring bazaar to display in my booth, and so that's what we're going to start on today. It's probably going to be a two-parter. I'm not sure how long this is going to take, but I think it's going to be rather extensive. The first part of this video is going to be laying out and cutting and preparing the fabric. And then I was going to tie-dye that into a spiral pattern. And then after that, I'm going to show you how to make some applique lettering to put on this banner. And then we'll lay that out, apply it, and then apply some grommets to the corner so I can hang it in my booth. All right, but at this time, let's have Buster show you how to subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Go ahead, take it away, Buster. Hey, far out, Buster. Thanks for that little heads up on how to subscribe. Hey, all you fine dude and dudettes. Hey, if you're ever curious about what Brad does between making videos, well, I told you in a previous video, and God, I don't remember how long ago it was, but I had mentioned that I'm trying to learn how to do some oil painting. And so I finally finished my first oil painting. Let me take you over to the table and show you what I've got accomplished. So here's my first oil painting. I chose a still life, something that's not too complicated, just something to get used to the oil paints. I've done a lot of work with acrylics, but I haven't explored using the medium of oils yet. It's always intrigued me, and so I thought I'd give it a try. So let me know what you think about it. All right, all you dude and dudettes. So here we are at my work table. So, like I said, this project is to make a tie-dye banner for a booth that I'm going to have at a spring bazaar coming up. So I had purchased 100% cotton fabric. It's pure white. And so just like our t-shirts, this is pre-washed and then dried. And so I need to iron it out before I can lay it out to cut it. So we need to get all the wrinkles out so it lays flat so we can cut it. So I'm just going to iron this up real quick. So while I'm ironing this, I'll tell you kind of what I'm planning on for this banner. I plan on making it, well, the finished dimensions will be 24 by 48. So to achieve that size, I am going to cut this 2 inches over in both directions so I have room to turn the hem under, turn it under once and then iron that down and then turn it under one more time and then stitch that down. I assume that my hems will consume 1 inch of material. So considering both ends and then top and bottom, I'm allowing 2 inches overall. All right, that's good enough for now. That gets most of the wrinkles out. Okay, so to cut the fabric to size, you're going to need a ruler. I've got my 24-inch by 6-inch quilting ruler, a rolling cutter, and then to help lay out the hemming of it, I've got my washable marker. That'll come in handy later. So the piece of fabric that I bought, the goods off of the bolt are 44 inches from salvage to salvage. So I purchased 1.5 yards, which is 56 inches. So because I'm going 2 inches over my finished measurements. So the dimensions of my cuts will be 26 by 50. Okay, so now that I got this ironed out pretty good, I mean, it'll need a little bit more ironing before we can go too much further, but it's at a point where now I can cut my fabric to size. And so when you get your fabric, it's probably not going to be really true square. So I'm going to show you how to square up one edge, so then we can measure off of that to cut the rest of the fabric. So the best way to do that is fold it in half. So the best way to true up your fabric, like I say, is to fold it in half. And this goes for any project. Fold your fabric in half, and it can be, depending on your project, fold it the width or the length of the fabric. Like I say, I am folding it in half on the narrow width. Then take your fabric after you've got it folded and the 2 edges trued up here. Then take that and lay it out on your cutting mat and lay your fold on any of the grid lines. Okay, there we go. So that gives me, because the only real true part of this fabric is your fold at this point. And so you want to line up your fold to a grid line on your cutting mat. Just like that. All right. Then smooth things out as best you can. Try and lay out the wrinkles flatter so you get a truer cut. There we go. Okay, and now at this point, take your ruler. I'm using my 24 by 6 quilting ruler, and I'm going to come in a good inch from the edge. I've got the ruler hanging off so I can line up to one of the grid lines. My ruler isn't as long as the fabric, so the way you can deal with that is take both layers of fabric and fold it back onto the ruler. And that way you can see and adjust to be sure you're on your line underneath the fabric. And now that's a pretty long cut, and I don't want the ruler shifting. So I have this 15-pound little barbell. Stick that on there. If you don't need to have one that heavy, but even a 5-pounder would help stabilize it. And then take your rolling cutter and cut down that edge. You can move the little bell. Now slide down, get on the line on the other end, line up to your cut. There we go. And then finish that off. There we go. Okay, so now you have a true edge. Now you have a true edge to measure off of. And so from here, I want to go over 26 inches. My cutting mat is 24 inches wide. So we're going to have to hang off at least 2 inches, probably 3 or 4, so I can have a clean cut. Okay, so now that I've got this trued edge that we can measure off of, I am going to measure from here over 26 inches. But because I'm right-handed, I want to flip this around so I can cut on my right side. And just like before, take the fold and line that up to one of the grid lines. There we go. And now I'm going to take my ruler and it's 24 inches, so I'm going to lay that across and take a washable marker, take a little tick mark there, then go another 2 inches. That'll be my 26 mark right there. Okay, we can line that up to one of our grid lines just to give me a little guide, make sure we're cutting true. So there's the 26. So now all we have to do is cut it to 50 inches long. All right, Busters. Brad was a little confused because when I went to measure this when it was in half, it wasn't calculating out to what I expected it to calculate off to. Well, that's because I was thinking that this was 56 inches wide, and it's not. It's 53. So that changes things a little bit. But nothing, it doesn't change it drastically. It just means I don't subtract as much. All right, let's get back to lining up my good cut edges so we can continue with this. Okay, there we go. Good as new. All right, so take your trued up edge, line that up here. So like I said, it's 53 inches. I want 50 inches. This is folded in half, so half of 3 is 1.5. So I just need to take off 1.5 inches, and that'll give me my 50. Half of 50 is obviously 25, so we can come across here, yeah. So we will take a little mark here at 25. There we are. Okay, well, now we can cut that. So let's line up my little tick mark here with one of the grid lines. There we go. Straighten it out, make sure you're true to your mat grid line so you have a good square cut at the end here. Okay. So there is my rough dimensions. And so now I'll iron this out a little bit nicer. And then we'll mark off and iron out the hem. And then we'll bring that to the sewing machine to stitch the hem in place. All right, let's get this ironed up really nice and pretty. All right, so there we are, all ironed out, nice and pretty. Makes it a little easier to work on. Okay, so our next step is just to mark off your hem. So by marking off your hem, and that way it gives you something to, it gives you a guideline to fold and iron down the hem. And that way it's just tidier and looks more professional when you're finished. So like I said, I'm doing a 1/2 inch fold over and then folding it over one more time, so a total of 1 inch. I've got my ruler on the edge of the banner, and I've got the 1/2 inch marks on the cut edge, and so that way I can just draw a little line, and that'll be my fold, and that'll get ironed over right there. And we'll do that on all 4 sides. So I will speed through that. Enjoy the music. Okay, that's all 4 sides marked off. All right, so at this point now we can start ironing over the hem. Okay, so at this point, now that you've got your fabric marked off for the hem, so flip it over so your marks are face down. So that way, when you go to fold it over, you see your line, and then you can see where to iron it on to. All right, so we've made it around 1 time. So at this point, now we can do the second rollover and then take it to the sewing machine. So at this point, I have doubled up this first end, but before we start doubling up the adjacent long end, the corner is going to get awfully thick because we've got fabric rolled over here twice and then twice again, so you have 4 layers of fabric there as opposed to everywhere else is just 2 layers. So to kind of control that so it's not so thick when we go to stitch it, come up just about 1/8 of an inch from the corner and diagonally cut that off. That'll help keep that from being too thick when we go around to stitch it. All right, so there we are all the way around. We've got our corners trimmed so they're not too thick. So now we can take it to the sewing machine and stitch that. I'm just going to give it about a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and this is a 1/2 inch. So that'll run about down the center of our hem. And because we're doing tie-dye on this, we've got cotton fabric, so make sure you're using 100% white cotton thread in both the bobbin and your top thread. And that's what I'm going to set up and do right now. All right, all my buster buddies, so I've got the hemming done on my banner. Like I said, we ironed it over as you saw, and then I stitched it with a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around. So that's all sewn up with white cotton thread so it dyes. So now that the banner is all hemmed out, and so we're ready to start the dyeing process. So the next step I have to do with this is soak it in some soda ash for 20 minutes. Then I'll spin it out. And once it's spun out, we'll come back and do the spiral and get that tied up, and then we'll be ready for dye. So I'm going to take it out in my garage, put it in the soda ash water for 20 minutes, and then spin it out. When it's ready, we'll be back here. All right, see you later. So she's been soaked and spun out. So now it's damp. So now I want to create my spiral. So I want to make sure I'm centered. And so the easiest way to do that is fold your tapestry, or in my case, my banner, in half. And then fold it in half again. All right, and then just kind of press down on that inside corner. That'll leave an impression that I can use as my center mark. All right, awesome. So here's my mark. So we'll just take that. So there's our spiral, all nice and tidy. Now just get some rubber bands to tie that up to hold it in place. All right, so I've got my rubber bands here. Grab some of those. On a spiral like this, it's not, the fabric isn't quite as heavy and dense as t-shirt material. So if you're using something that's similar to this fabric, you don't want rubber bands that are going to be too tight or it will make it collapse. You just want something to hold it softly, just to hold the ends together. Okay, and that's good enough. So that's ready for dye. So let's go out to the garage. I still have to mix up my dye, and then we'll dye this and put it in the tub to cure for 24 hours. All right, Busters, so we're here at my laundry sink. I am going to mix up my dye. So for my rainbow spiral, I'm going to be using turquoise, Chinese red, and bright yellow. And so I am going to mix them up according to Dharma's formula. So it'll be 2 teaspoons of dye to 1 tablespoon of urea for every 8 ounces of water. And that's what I'm mixing all 3 colors at. Okay, I'll let you watch that. Enjoy the music. Okay, so I've got all my dry dye powder and urea in the bottles. I just warmed up the water. I like to fill my bottles with hot water. It helps everything dissolve quicker and more completely. So now it's time to add the 8 ounces of water to each bottle. So those are all mixed up, ready for the application. So here's my spiral. Okay, so let's start applying. Start with the red. All right, so there's all our dye applied. You can see in the back we already started getting some blending of colors, so that helps create our rainbow. So now this will go in the tub to cure for 24 hours, then I'll take it out, rinse it out. We'll give it a good wash out with my dye fixative, and then I'll show it to you tomorrow. And so this is the end of the first phase. The next part of the video will be actually creating the lettering and applying it. All right, Busters. So we got finished with the first part of this project. Created the banner, got the spiral tie-dye done. I think it came out beautiful. Hey, if you learned something new on this video, why don't you give me a thumbs up? You know, if you really liked it, please subscribe to my channel. And don't forget to ring that notification bell so you don't miss any of the upcoming videos on my channel. So come back and see part 2 of this 2-part series. We'll be making the applique lettering to go on my banner that I'll be using in an upcoming spring bazaar. Thanks a lot for watching, and don't forget to go bust out some art.